This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Hi, Shalom Aleichem, everybody, and I apologize. The plane we were on, they took us off, they put us back on. I'm sorry, I apologize, we came straight. We're going to try and do our best today to cover very sensitive inyanim. I'm going to do my best. The handouts you have, I just want to point out the slides that I have that I'm going to be using are in your handout, but I'm not going to go through them all. So don't panic if I don't do them all. There's a lot of information there, which is fine. You can read it afterwards and think about it, but if we don't cover it all, I had never intended to. It's nothing to do with the late time. It's just a fact. We don't have to do it all. So the subject is like this. All of us, everyone here and everywhere we go and talk about this subject, we're aware of the reality of, unfortunately, children seemingly suddenly diverting from the path of Torah and Masorah, the Derech that we brought them up in, Derech Sol Saba. We tried our best, and it happens. So for many, many years, I've been trying to understand, research, and make sense out of this sugya. Initially, the reaction in the Olam, going back some 25 years ago, was this all has to do with dysfunctional homes. I knew that wasn't true. I knew it wasn't true because professionally I was myself engaged in working with families and children who were struggling. And my wife and I, struggled with some of our own children, so we also knew it wasn't true because we didn't consider ourselves dysfunctional. At least maybe others did, but we didn't. What I did notice is that when you have a child who's struggling, profoundly struggling, it will throw your home into dysfunction. But that doesn't make you a dysfunctional home. And it was pashut to me that we needed starker research to understand this phenomena, what's happening here. More specifically, to develop a mahalach that with some predictability and with a havana of what it is that's really bothering the kids, that's hurt them, that there will be some level of predictability of helping these children recover, take back their lives in a healthy way initially, and quite reasonably, although not predictably, but quite reasonably, re-engage a life consistent with a level of shmiras hamitzvahs that we could all feel comfortable with each other. This we researched and we understood, and the product of this workshop is really the product of all the work we've been doing for about 25 years, trial and error in lots of different places, and refining the mahalach and getting it clearer and clearer so it makes sense. So it starts, I want to be clear, we've sort of branded this, are we on the screen? Where's the screen? What does it say on the screen? Oh, it's good, we're on the same thing, good. Okay, so we branded prevention and recovery. Prevention, because obviously that's the best thing on earth we can do, and if we can take this information and pass it on to friends, family, and certainly to children as they bring up their families, we will go a long way in doing prevention. But it is also a mahalach that in order to understand recovery, we need to understand what happened. How could it perhaps have been avoided in the first place? That havana is crucial to understand what we're going to do to help the kids recover. Unless we deeply, and I mean deeply, understand what happened to them. And for most of us, frankly, that means firmly and once and for all get rid of the notions of Yetzer Hara. almost all of us initially think and are very influenced by the belief, das Yetzer Hara. It's just the Yetzer Hara driving them to do bad things. That mahalach of the Yetzer Hara mahalach, which comes with Musa, is not only guaranteed not to help and quite likely be mazik, but it puts these children very deeply into a sekonos nefashos matzav. And that's as real can be. I'm not saying it to be dramatic, I'm saying it factually. It puts kids into sekonos nefashos. So we're going to go through what's the mahalach, and I'm going to divide it into 3 parts. The first part of this, which we could term prevention, but it's really understanding what normative, idealized chinuch habanim v'abanos should look like. Well, what should it look and feel like if we all did it perfectly? Which the Maisa, none of us do it perfectly. Let's be honest. But at least we can establish what should it look like were we to do it perfectly. And that's crucial because then we can understand from that perspective what happened to the kids and why they weren't able to hold their lives together as they went on their journeys through life. And by understanding what should have happened, we can then make more sense and formulate what we're going to be doing to bring them back to us, which in a certain way is the very early reparenting of the kids. We go back to their essence of who they are, and we try and repair them in a very deep and healthy way, as if they're literally coming back to life again the first time round. So there's going to be 3 stages of this. What should it look like? Parenting, ideally. How is it meant to be to bring up healthy kids? Then we're going to examine what went wrong with our struggling kids, and that will lead us into a very deep, and I hope, clarifying, clear Havana of what we need to do with those who have gone off and are struggling to bring them back to us. These are the 3 parts of this presentation. So let's start with normative childhood development. All my slides are in your booklets, but if you go with me through them, again, I'm going to skip some, but some we're going to spend more time understanding it. So there's a mitzvah. The mitzvah in the Torah, period of Rivia, everyone knows the mitzvah to have children, but the chinuch tells us this mitzvah is really 2 parts. One is bringing the children into the world, but he quotes and he mentions this mitzvah of lo so bara l'shevis yitzar, a pasuk in Yeshaya. So what's this mitzvah of lo so bara? Kadosh Baruch Hu wanted healthy people in this world. The way I understand the mitzvah, why and how I came to it isn't for right now. But the mitzvah means to bring children into this world who are healthy in body and mind, they're happy, and they're capable of self-love and capable of loving others. And this goal of bringing a human being, this is what the Eibishter wanted. He didn't want this rayas from Tosfos a couple of places. They didn't want people who were emotionally unstable. That wasn't the goal, to bring in emotionally unhealthy people into the world. Kadosh Baruch Hu wanted to fill the world with emotionally healthy people, physically and emotionally healthy people, capable of self-love, capable of loving others. And this is crucial. And I'll tell you why it's crucial. I see it clearer and clearer as we go through the challenging times that we live in, which are simply becoming more challenging. I think everyone's maida that the challenges of today's children, it just is indescribable compared to what we went through when we were children. It's just a different world, a different set of struggles and challenges. But this is crucial, because prior to our zeal in installing mitzvahs into our children, prior to making that the primary firm dagesh, that we're going to create these children, mitzvahs in them, make little mitzvah machines out of these children, we actually had a more important job prior to that, which is creating healthy human beings. And in fact, were we to be able to do that and create a child who is, as I said, healthy in body and mind, happy, capable of self-love and loving others, when we create that, mitzvahs install very nicely into such a person. It's kind of a natural flow. It just makes sense to them, and it installs very easily. Masha'en kain, if, unfortunately, in the attempt to install these mitzvahs as early as we possibly can into our children, we sacrifice ever the development of creating a healthy, happy, loving child, then we're already veering off into a dangerous path in this day and age. I do want to comment that this is not for this particular presentation. I have spoken about it at length in other drashas. You could find it online. That historically, there was a time when children worldwide had a natural deference to their elders. They naturally respect their elders. It was a time when a parent's authority was more or less accepted by children, and they sitted from the toughness and firmness of a parent, and so we got away with it. I submit to you that for the vast majority of all our children today, that's gone. That natural respect and awe, reverence, fear for a parent is over. For most children, it doesn't exist anymore. And quite honestly, I see absolutely no option for how on earth we can bring that back. It's gone beyond us already. It's the door of chutzpah yazki. It's a different generation today, and it's not coming back. We're not bringing it back. So it's pointless to lament it. In this day and age, therefore, it's profoundly important that we put a tremendous dagesh on creating this healthy child, a child capable of love and self-love, a person who's happy. Because only such a person does, for the vast majority of kids, do mitzvahs install easily. And this is, of course, crucial to us, because what is our life if not the desire and attempt to bring up our children b'derech Yisrael Sabbath, the way we were brought up, to keep Torah mitzvahs and be close to Rabbi Shimon. This is our desire, our heart's desire, and it's our goal of life. So if we don't bring up the children this way where the mitzvahs install easily, we're already edging in the wrong direction. So the first mitzvah, this mitzvah, lo so bar l'shevis, this is the ideal, is that our first dagesh, had we only known this, most of us, by the way, no one ever told us any of this. I find it astonishing that when I talk about it, people come to me and they actually have never ever heard this ever. And they cannot imagine, how's that possible, that we became parents and we had children and we didn't have this picture clearly in our heads of what we're meant to be doing. But the fact is, it seems that we did not. But that's going to have to change as we go forward. That we need to understand the primary goal is a healthy, loving child. In such a child, we can realistically expect mitzvahs to install. Otherwise, it doesn't work. There's another way to look at this. And this is a deeper way of really operationalizing what does it mean to do this mitzvah, Lishevis Yitzhara, and I look at it in 3 stages. So the first stage is unconditional love, 0 to 2. 0 to 2, we ought to, and the 2, don't hold me, it's not on the second birthday, boom, this thing ends. It's a concept. But 0 to 2, our primary goal is this installation of love, caring, happiness, where a child feels completely safe with us and feels loved and cared for by us. That means that whatever they do, we never get mad with them. Now, for many of us who grew up with parents who, in the old days, did the classic parenting, which was getting mad with us when you do something wrong, that's going to be a challenge, because that doesn't work anymore. for the majority of children, it doesn't work anymore. All it does is create a fantasy of compliance. The kids comply because you're standing there glaring at them. But internally, there's no internalization of your values and your beliefs. There's just a myrsis while you're looking at them. So it doesn't do any good. On the contrary, what it actually does is show the children that they have more power than you, which is incredibly, incredibly dangerous. Does that make clear? Do I have to be married on that? Is it poshut? Right? So unconditional love, what does it mean? It means like this, that whatever your child does, you laugh. I'll give you a few examples just so you understand. A mother is a teacher and she's busy in the morning getting all the kids off, and she has to go to work and it's late. And she's feeding her child a bowl of Cheerios, pretty reasonable thing to do. She's all dressed and ready to go to work. And she's just feeding the child Cheerios in the high chair. Child is let's say about a year old. And she hears a noise behind her and she turns to see what's going on behind her. And in that moment, her child flips the entire bowl of Cheerios all over her. Her sheitel, her clothes, her shoes, the works. I mean, it's just a perfect shot. And she's completely covered in this Cheerios and milk. Now, what is meant to happen? So I want to explain a yesod that's so profound and deep. What is meant to happen is that you burst out laughing. Can I let that sink in for a minute? The ideal is you burst out laughing. That does not mean that you later on explain to the child about keeping the Cheerios on the plate and not throwing it on mommy and whatever else you have to explain, but you do it later. But the moment when it's happened, the one thing you don't want to do is start yelling and screaming and blaming this person for distracting you, and I'm overwhelmed, and why isn't my husband helping, and no one's doing, and what the child hears is angry, frustrated, loud noises of hurt and dissension, which tells the child what? That I'm a bad boy, that I'm a bad person. What's meant to happen, ideally, is that you laugh and you pinch his cheeks and you go and get changed. And if you need more help and backup and support, because this thing is pretty overwhelming with all the kids in the morning, later on quietly, not while the child is listening, you have a conversation with your husband and you work it out. How are we going to handle this better? But b'shas maisa, when it happens, the child should be zeicha to a loving, funny, burst-out response. I'll give you another example. You finally convince the husband to paint the dining room. Finally, it's been a mess for a long time, so good, we got the money, we paint the dining room, and it's all done, it's nice, the furniture's not put back yet. And then suddenly one of the kids comes in screaming, you run inside the dining room and you find your toddler got hold of a red permanent marker and did some Picasso all over the white, the newly fresh painted dining room walls. It's covered with whatever you want to call it, paintings. What you don't want to do is start yelling, who left the pen out? Who did this? What are you thinking? Why isn't anyone watching the baby? And all the rest of that stuff. What you're meant to do is take out the camera, pose next to it, and take pictures. They're moiridik for the Sheva Brachas. This, trust me, they're moiridik for later on. But if we would only chap the tiefkeit of what I just said, it's not just that we shouldn't get mad with them, but what's happening is we are installing in our children a feeling that they are safe with us and they are beloved no matter what they do. No matter what they do. You go to a chasna and you go a long drive. You got to go from here to Monsey, and you have a baby sitting on your lap, and it's a very close relative, so you're wearing a gown on the way. And you get out the car and discover that your baby leaked through onto this light-colored gown. What you're not meant to do is start shrieking and yelling and getting upset. The baby picks this up. The child feels your body language and experiences a lack of safety, of being insecure, of not being loved. Again, we take pictures. I don't know what, you have to clean it up somehow. I'm not giving answers on that. But what I am saying is that the baby should be able to experience that whatever they do, unconditional love. If they fall and hurt themselves, we don't start right away with the whole, din v'cheshbon, who left the skates out, who left that, and they tripped on them, they fell on them. We don't get angry as an initial response to anything the little kids, 0 to 2, whatever they do. We respond with unconditional love. We laugh, we take pictures, we clean up the mess, and we understand that's what 0 to 2s do. They make a mess. They make a mess, and they cause our lives, they disrupt our lives. But if we would understand that very disruption of our lives is an opportunity for us to install in these children the safety and love of life, that they can be safe and happy people, and they can be loved unconditionally. That does not mean we don't talk to them afterwards, explain what they did was wrong, walk them back to the wall later on and show them the pen and explain to them this is not okay on the walls. Of course, we do normative things later on, but primarily, when it happens, we don't get angry. It's a child, it's a 0 to 2 child without any real tiefkeit or havana of life. What are we getting angry? Why are we yelling? 0 to 2 is a crucial time in childhood development because it tells our kids they're unconditionally loved no matter what they do. And you'll discover that the more they do these crazy little things, that is, act like children, the more they do the interruptions of our lives and the things that create the disharmony in our lives, and that we react with a laugh and a smile, with love and take pictures, it's like we're giving them a vaccine of love and security. If we would realize how powerful it is, by the way, there's a ton of research behind what I'm saying right now. I'm just capturing it all. What we're really doing is creating the healthy attachments of life. If we would understand how profound it is, we'd wish they would have done more. We would have wished they'd do more, because the very act of doing these things that should disrupt us, and we react with the warmth, the love, and the smile, creates the healthy neshama, the healthy human being inside, that then becomes resilient for life. That's 0 to 2. Now, it doesn't stop there. It's not like a 0 to 2, we stop that and then start the next thing. We continue that forever. But that's all we do is 0 to 2. We're not lecturing and disciplining and getting angry with them. None of that works. At 2 starts the second stage, which is limit setting. At 2, children, roughly around 2, children become curious, as they should, about the world around them. They become interested. They're exploring the world. A healthy child is going out into the world a bit more, separating more from the safety of their parent and exploring life. And in doing so, they can actually put themselves into dangerous, really truly dangerous situations. So healthy parenting now starts setting limits. And when they're little, they don't really have a lot of choices. Bedtime is bedtime because we picked them up and put them in the crib. There wasn't a conversation about them going to bed. There was us picking them up and putting them in the crib or wherever bedtime. But limit setting happens when their developing ratzon, is to go and do what they want to do, and we have to stop them doing it. That's limit setting. We set limits on their behavior. Now, if we've done the first stage of life correctly, which means we understood about the 0 to 2, and both husband and wife, the parents of this child, practiced, as I described, that whatever they do, you laugh, you take the pictures, you shmeichel, you smile, and then later on, of course, you always talk to them as they get more mature about their behavior, but you separate that from the b'shas ma'aseh. B'shas ma'aseh is all love and fun and cute. When you've done that properly, in normative development, childhood development, the limit setting is then experienced by the child as an extension of that same love and caring you gave them 0 to 2. They internally, I'm not saying, they're sitting there, working. It's not like that, not at all. But internally, what we're doing is actually mapping their brains during the 0 to 2. And you've created a map, a neurological map in their brain that tells them they are be'etzem loved and cared for, and that we appreciate and we value them. Therefore, when you start doing limit setting, it's experienced through that same picture of love and caring. So they somehow internalize that the limit setting is in their best interest. So even if they resist, which all children do, they test limits, that's the nature of children. When they test our limits, there's something programmed into them already telling them that Bastama, what Mami and Tati meant, was for my best interest. Again, it's pre-rational, but it's programmed. You know this is true because a child who's been brought up this way or related to their early chinuch, the 0 to 2 is love and acceptance, even if they're mad with you in the next stage when you set limits on them, the chances are extremely high that when they wake up tomorrow morning, they don't remember it, they have no resentment towards you, and they go back to life as normal, they just love you, and they got that big smile on their face when they see you in the morning, because they didn't experience the limit setting of yesterday as something that was punitive. Masha'en Kain, if we don't do the 0 to 2 effectively, then when we set limits, they feel, why are you doing this to me? I want to have fun. Why are you stopping? You're mean. You're just mean. You're so. And I hear Kaseda from my clients and people I talk to, how their kids, little kids, will say to their parents, "You're being so mean. Why are you so mean? You don't love me. You don't like me." All that comes out of the limit-setting stage because they didn't have enough of the 0 to 2 unconditional love. And had they had that properly, then when we move into setting, like walking in the street, you're walking down the street, the child walks near the curb, you grab them and you pull them away. And if they do it again and again and again, you give them an insult punch. You give them an insult punch. Not to hurt them, but to insult them. And they cry. But they learn not to walk near the street. But they won't hate you for it. Because somehow programmed into them is the belief that this is in my best interest. That's why my mummy or my tati are doing this to me, because they care about me. Whereas if they didn't have that, unfortunately, you set up a challenge in life where they're always feeling you're mean. Why are you stopping me? Why can't I do this? Why can't I do that? Every time you set limits on almost anything, they experience it as negative control over them, which they do not appreciate. So the second stage of life, when built properly, is limit setting. And as they get older, so we have to be more sophisticated about setting limits. Because different children grow and mature in different ways, and it depends on your family, what age they are in the family. The younger ones, all of us as parents know that the younger ones, we're just healthier than we are with our older ones, because we kind of worked it out better, and we became less rigid. That's the way it is. That's why the Bechor gets Pishtayim, Pistama, they deserve it, But for the rest of the kids, I know in my family, all the siblings, they're all, adults today. The youngest is 23, and his older siblings always tell him, you had different parents than us. Where'd you come from? You came from a different family. But Lamaisa, children develop differently, but all of them will accept that limit setting, even though they initially have to push the boundaries, because by pushing back when we set limits is how they learn the value of whether this thing is good or bad or right or wrong. That's where they learn it from. They won't know otherwise. And that's different for different things in different circumstances and different situations with different families. So it's a very intricate process. However, overall, children who got the 0 to 2, they will accept the limit setting, even if they get grumbly about it and upset with you at night, but tomorrow morning they're just fine. They absorbed it because they knew it was to do with love. They knew it was to do with, I care about you. When that works well, you come to the third stage, which is guidance. It's natural. So as the kids get older, again, we've been doing unconditional love all the way through, adding the limit setting. They then see us as the source of healthy hadracha in their lives, because as they mature, they actually value the limit setting that we placed on them, especially as we allow that limit setting to go bit by bit as they get older, and they see us giving them more discretion and more time and more ability to, maybe to make their own decisions. They watch us doing that as they get older. So then they turn to us for guidance. And they turn for guidance about perhaps which yeshiva to go to or which seminary to go to. Certainly when it comes to shidduchim, they turn to us because they trust us. They trust us because we built a binyan in our children where they turn to us for guidance about life, life's choices, decisions to do with parnasa and choosing a spouse and education. They turn to us naturally. That's the ideal way it's meant to work. That's the expression of l'sheves yitzhara, of how we bring up healthy children. And let's take it even deeper. So this word attachment, for the last 5 years or so, I've been talking a lot about this word attachment. It's an old psychological word. I'm a British psychologist, Bowlby, but it's a profound yesod, and I just felt that we could understand it and use it. It would help us. Attachment means like this. Idealized, I'm not going to go through all the different bad attachment styles, but ideally, we want to create attachment between ourselves and our children in a way where they feel so connected to us, where they feel safe in the relationship with us to actually differentiate from us without feeling that we're mad or we're upset with them, or that they have to kind of run away from us. We actually launch them into life. As we say, you get married, you leave your parents, you move on. Ideally, we want our children to be healthy, secure human beings, and they're different to us. They're not us. And we want them to be independent, healthy people who have the capacity to then leave us and get married and go through life and form healthy relationships. Because life, all of life, the way Hashem created it, is built around relationships. We're not meant to be alone. Not just lo tov es adam levade. I mean, as a community, as people. We have minyanim. We live in a culture of communities and society. No one is healthy living alone. We live together with people. To live together with people, we need to have the ability to do relationships well, to read people, understand people, and work in relationships in a healthy way, where I can preserve my ability to be authentically me, and I'm unique. We're all unique. Like the Rambam says, Deis harbi yesh la'adam. We're all unique people. So how do we as unique people work out how to live with each other, where I preserve my uniqueness while I honor yours? And I'm not threatened by you. I'm actually curious about you. And maybe I can learn from you something. And you can learn from me something. As a community, this is how we support each other. The idealized picture of how it seems to me HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted the world to be was that we live in relationships. We're not meant to live alone. Where do we learn the skills of how to live in a relationship? And why is that so crucial? We learn the skills of relationship through this thing called attachment. Attachment is how we early as children connect with our parents and we feel at home, safe and connected, and learn the skills in our relationship with our parents that we then ideally will take with us into life to form relationships, husband and wife, and with a boss or an employee or with the chevra in shul or whoever else you're mixing with, that we know how to do proper relationships. Just as a sidebar, the reality of one of the many consequences of the tragedy of the Holocaust to us as a community is that attachments for a generation were destroyed. Ruba deruba, they were destroyed. That means there wasn't either for the door who went through it lost developing healthy attachments with their parents, because you can't have healthy attachments when you're living in survival mode. And even for most of the survivors who did come afterwards, nurturing healthy attachment was not the high priority in their lives. Survival was. Continuity of our traditions and our values. I mean, if this sounds in any way like some sort of criticism, I hope you understand it's the exact opposite. I say it with a heavy heart, having worked with survivors and their children my whole career, that they sacrificed nurturing attachments. People after the war would not go to therapy. That was like such an idiotic thing to even think of. It was like a total geisha, foolish waste of time and money. They were engaged in survival. Trouble is that a lot of the culture that came to us through the survivors who did what they had to do, which was survive and rebuild, compromised attachment with children, which would have been natural otherwise. I really believe is a natural way a human being is that we don't have to be taught how to do attachments. We would just naturally do it with our children. But the Holocaust interrupted that. And I can tell you that it's going to take generations to wash out. It's not 3, it's going to take 10 or more, unless we work on it. And so that's why for the last 5 years, I've been talking in our world about attachment a lot, because I think if we have a concept and we know what we're working with, we can do that repair work very quickly. We don't have to wait for 10 generations of mistakes to overcome that. So what is attachment? So attachment is best described. I saw this particular model, and it appealed to me in a book by Dr. Dan Siegel. He talked about attachment. It's an old psychology. Like I said, in psychology, it's an old term that's sort of made a comeback in the world because it's understood so much better. And I'm personally, as I said, trying to bring it to our world because I think it has so much value. But his model, I took his model. He says it almost as an aside, but I found it to be profound, and I've explored it and tried to work on it and bring it to our attention. And it's a model that solves this idea of the 4 S's. The 4 S's of attachment: safe, secure, seen, and soothed. And that's how you build attachment. And in a moment, I'm going to explain what they are. Say again? Look at that. I did it on a plane in the middle of the night, flying from Israel. Thank you. Wow, terrific. Safe, secure, and secure, right? That's what I said? I'm just kidding. Just kidding. Is it the right one in the book? Safe, it should say in the book, safe, secure, seen, and soothed. Terrific. The last one should say soothed. S-O-O-T-H-E-D. Soothed. Not something that Holocaust survivors were very into. Soothing. Like, just get on with it. Shut up and, let's survive. So let's talk about safe, secure, seen, because safe, secure, seen is such a profound model, and it's so incredibly simple. And all this stuff, this is all, again, begetta prevention. However, what we're going to discover is, in the course of these few hours together, is this is going to be the heart and soul of recovery too. It's not just about prevention, which I will explain shortly. So what do they mean? Safe. The first responsibility of us as parents is to create safety with our kids. Like I gave in the mashal where the 1.5-year-old threw the Cheerios all over you, that's an opportunity actually to create safety where you laugh and giggle and you realize the comedy of the whole situation and the absurdity of it, and the child feels safe with you because they kind of chap, they've done something wrong. Your body is going to react so they see something, so they know. But at the same time, and you talk to them about it later on, but when you talk to them, when you react to them, you create safety with them, where they feel that mommy and tati are safe people. We don't get hurt by them. Safety is in every aspect of life. It's the way we drive our cars. Although you live in Borough Park, some of you, so this I have no clue how to even begin to fathom. Just driving through here, I had a panic attack just when they brought me here. Triple parked, on both sides. Like, what is... Anyway, it's a different drasha. But ideally, we should be safe when we're driving cars. And we should make sure that our kids are safe so that we lock windows and close doors and we do the technical safety things. More importantly, is we create safety, emotional safety. I'm actually doing, in a few weeks' time, I'm doing a program on the Coach Menachem show on emotional neglect, which I personally believe to be the most damaging and profound form of complex trauma there is emotional neglect. We're going to do a whole program on it because I mentioned it in a previous program, and the response was they got so many thousands of letters asking for more on this subject. But emotional neglect undermines safety. You don't feel safe when you get neglected, when your feelings and thoughts aren't taken seriously, when you're told not to trust yourself. Doesn't create safety. We have to have safety at things obvious things, like the Shabbos table. That's why my Rebbe, Ramatisyo Shlita, he was very much against the widespread abuse of children through parsha sheets at the Shabbos table. I'm saying that obviously a little cynically, but you understand the point, because there's always some kids who can't do it. And for them, it's a nightmare. It's an absolute nightmare of nightmares to be verheerd publicly at the table. It's not creating safety for them. On the contrary, we're actually almost doing the exact opposite of making them unsafe about life. We have to create safety in all forms of levels, whether it's in learning and friendships and life, as we teach our children. But the primary place they learn safety is with us. And this is going to be crucial in the off the Derech sugya, creating safety, because it's through creating safety in our relationship with our children where, guess what? Whatever they tell us they were doing or got up to or fell into or did wrong, and they know it, they can turn to us. That if something happened, you'll hear this from me throughout the day, that if something happened to them, or they got caught up in something inappropriate, and they kind of know it, it's on us to have created the safety in our relationship with them so they can come and tell us without fearing the look of pain and shame on our face that tells them it isn't safe to come and tell me about your problems. Do you understand how profound that is? Safety in relationships, they will learn by learning that you're you, and you will go through your struggles in this world. You will have your problems. You will be exposed at times to inappropriate things. And we, as parents, have the responsibility to create safety with our children where they can come to us and predictably get support, love, caring, hadracha from us, not looks of shock and fear that tell them, don't you ever do that again. I'll never come again and tell my father or my mother. Never. Not when they react like that. And effectively, we're already setting them up for disaster. Safety is the first and the key to creating healthy attachment with us, where they feel safe. We work through our relationship with them. For example, there are times when we have to discipline, perhaps criticize, and be madrich our children in what's right and wrong in this world. Every parent has to do that sometimes. It's our job. But what a difference when we do that job in a way that creates safety with a child, where the child does not feel terrified of us, where we put them down and make them feel like worthless because I'm pointing out what you're doing wrong. But on the contrary, I'm understanding you, I love you, I hear you, you're safe with me, Shefala. Guess what? When you create safety, they can hear that criticism, they can take that hadracha, and more importantly than anything else, we create the safety in our relationship with them that they feel safe with other people too. So they can take that into life into their relationships with their friends, and they learn how to negotiate relationships in a way that's safe with their rebbes and their teachers, with their friends, ultimately with the Ribono Shel Olam, where a person can feel safe with HaKadosh Baruch Hu and not terrified, like coming to Yom Noraim, terrified, as if Hashem wants to hurt me. Hashem doesn't want to hurt me, He wants to be close to Him. He wants me to love Him and to be close to Him. That attachment with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is really what Yom Noraim is all about, we're right before Yom Kippur, is that Hashem, of course, I want to reflect upon that which I did wrong and improve so I can be close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Where do you think we learn that? Children learn that from us as parents, that when they mess up, we reach out to them in a world of safety where it's safe for them to acknowledge what they did wrong so that they can then overcome what they did wrong and do right. And we do it in a way that we make them feel safe to us. This is our system. This is where we learn it. The first axiom of good attachment, healthy attachment with parents, comes by us creating safety with them. And regardless of what we have to tell them, and regardless of what we discover they're up to, we need to respond in a way that we've created safety, where we're relevant to them. If not, then they'll never turn to us. And when, God forbid, they face their various challenges and struggles in life, we'll be the last person they come to, which really sets them up for disaster. That's the first one, safety. Secure. It's really important that our kids feel secure in their home. They grow up in a place where life is predictable. Life is comfortable. Where a Shabbos table, for example, is a place that they look forward to being at because there's a security of knowledge and awareness of how nice this is going to be. Where before, for example, what's not secure? Before Pesach, if they watch their parents melting down for a month before Pesach, crying and worried and fearful about what Pesach is going to look like, we undermine the principle of security. When it comes to camp in the summer, a child should know whether we can afford it or can't afford it. We're going to take care of your summer needs. I don't know. We'll discuss what and how. But not like, it costs so much money, I don't know if we can afford it. You understand? We have to avoid making expressions to our children that create insecurity in them about our ability to care for them. Same thing with clothing. They should have clothing, the right clothing in season as they need it. And when they grow up, as they grow taller, they need to know and be confident, I will get the appropriate clothing, what I need. They have to be secure about their parents' marriage. And if you have a challenged marriage, go work on it. Because there's nothing that undermines security more than the children experiencing and witnessing and hearing the struggles of a marriage and the fears that go with it. All this undermines their ability to thrive and to feel secure. A child has to feel secure that who they are, how they feel, is valid. The fact that they feel a certain way about life is valid. Not that we tell them constantly, you shouldn't feel that way. Like, why are you feeling like that? It creates a terrible insecurity in a child if they're told lines like, you shouldn't be feeling like that. They feel that way. So now we're just teaching them not to trust their own feelings, which creates tremendous insecurity, and when done enough in childhood, creates anxiety disorders because they don't know if they can trust themselves. So we have to create security in their life that what's happening around them, they're confident that we as parents are capable and willing to bring them up, take care of them, look after them, meet their needs, even if the needs and things they demand at times may actually be outside our financial budget at the moment, but we talk to them about it in a way that doesn't make them feel insecure and fearful about everything in life. We need to relate to them in a way that their feelings are valid, they're understood, and we will do our best to meet them so they have an environment to live in where they can feel secure. Seen. Some argue this is the most important one of all the attachments. And I'm not sure, I'm always going backwards and forwards with it myself, whether it is. Seen means like this. Every single one of us is endowed, every neshama, with a uniqueness. It is our job as parents, and actually it's the heart and soul of chinuch. Why, by the way, this is lost to us, I don't understand at all. But in truth, what chinuch is all about, true chinuch, I'm talking, the halachic, chanech pidake. What chinuch really is about is actually helping our children know themselves and helping them guide and direct the uniqueness of who they are in this world to be an accomplished person. See, there's two words we use. We throw them around. Sometimes they're the same person. There's a melamed and there's a mechanech. And sometimes a melamed is taka mechanech as well. But they're actually two different jobs. A melamed is about installation. Installing yediyah in the head of a child that has no yediyah. For example, a child goes to cheder and they have no clue what a aleph is, and they certainly don't know what kometz aleph is. So we teach them kometz aleph. We teach it to them. So we teach it. We install yediyah. We teach them Rashi, and we teach them, how to understand a Mishnah and English, and we teach them life. We're installing yediyahs in their heads that they hitherto didn't have. That's the job of a melamed. So the word means melamed, causing to learn, causing to know. It's about installation. It is an utterly different job than the job of chinuch. A mechanech is about extraction, not about installation. A mechanech, the word is related, I'll tell you, just so you understand it. We have a Chanukas Abayis, right? You build a new house, Baruch Hashem, the Eibishter gave you a beautiful house, and you make a nice Chanukas Abayis. The Chanukas Abayis is not to show off your house to the neighbors. They should all be embarrassed. They should all be, wish I had such a nice house. It's not for that. Chas v'shalom. A Chanukas Abayis is a beautiful dedication of the potential that lies in this gift, this home Eibishter gave us. The potential that lies in this home to bring up a family, a Vegeштila family, to make a Shabbos, to make a Yontef, to do Achnach Tzorchim, to all the things we do in the home. The potential that lies in this home, we acknowledge and we talk about and we thank the Eibishter for the potential that lies in this beautiful home he gave us. That's Chanukas Abayis. The word is Chanukah. The Chanukas Abayis is about a dedication to a potential, an acknowledgement of the potential. In the same way, Chinuch really is about us as parents looking deeply inside our children and thinking constantly about who are they, not thinking about how will I make them in my image. That they get by osmosis. That they get naturally. That they get by admiration and revering us and respecting us because of the way we treated them. So their personalities mold in a rough tzura to reflect who we are. We don't have to enforce that. We simply have to act in an erlicha way, in a loving, caring, erlicha way, and our children naturally kind of move towards replicating us. I'm talking about something else. I'm talking about chanech na pidake, because it can only be al pidake. You know why? Because chinuch is about the potential that lies inside a person, the uniqueness inside every single person, and it is our job as parents to see who they are, to notice them. I used to, as my children were little growing up, so Friday night I would think, I gave them a bracha, the regular bracha Friday night before Kiddush, but I would look during the week and try and observe something special that I noticed about them or their behavior during that week. And when I gave them a kiss after I gave them the regular bracha, I would whisper in their ear, I noticed this about you. I saw you did this. I see this is very special. Something. It's our job to pull out of our children, who are they? What is the uniqueness HaKadosh Baruch Hu gebenched them with? And reflect that uniqueness back to them in a way that's loving and kind, so they can know who they are. That's seen. The opposite to seen is where all we ever do is try to convince them that the way they are is not okay, and they really need to be like this. As if we have some sort of mystical template in our brains that came from Moshe Rabbeinu and told us that we have to force our kids to be a certain tzura that's guaranteed to destroy them. It's the exact opposite of what the Torah says in Chanoch Na'apidaka. It's mamish the exact verkehrt. What we're meant to do is rely on our loving kindness around our children that will embrace them to orient themselves towards us, our anhogas, our values, without enforcing it at all, just by being who we are. But the job of chinuch is to pull out of them their own uniqueness. Find out who they are. Find out what's special about that scene. And the last one is soothed. Soothed. Kids hurt themselves. Kids get in trouble. A kid comes back from school, gets in trouble, storms into the house, and he's furious because the Rebbe said this, or the teacher said that, or a kid bullied him, and they're crying and they're angry. And what happens, unfortunately, in so many homes is an immediate din v'cheshbon of, so what did you do wrong? How did you cause this? Again you aggravated your Rebbe? Again I have to have another phone call? Do you understand? The first thing we're meant to do, it doesn't matter what they did. It doesn't matter if you know for sure, 100% that they were at fault. Even if you knew, it's irrelevant. The first thing you do is you soothe them. If they're little, you put them on your lap and you hold them. If they're older, you validate their feelings, you listen. You tune into how they feel. It's remarkable, by the way, when you do this with older children. You simply reflect back to them what they're saying in a compassionate and kind fashion. That's what you do with older, young teenagers, adolescents. You simply reflect back, that must have been so hard for you. I hear it was very painful for you when the Rebbe said this, or when the teacher did that, or when this kid did that. It must have been so painful. When you reflect it back to them, then what happens, you do it properly, then the children almost always say, yeah, but I probably shouldn't have done this, and they'll tell you themselves. All that you're trying to hold back because you want to give them a piece of your mind and a good shtickle musa, they'll tell you. They'll tell you. And you soothe them through it. When it's a little kid, you took the training wheels off their little bicycle and you said, wait till Tati comes home, he'll take you for a ride. He'll help you. And he took the bike, and of course he broke his finger and he's grazed his knee, and now you got to take him to the hospital, and it's Erev Shabbos, and who knows what, and it's a whole mess. You soothe your child first. First you soothe him. It's crucial that we soothe him. First, you want to talk to him about what he did was wrong, and I told you to wait, and now you see you got in trouble. That's all later. We can do all that. We should do that. We need to do that. But not now. When a child's in pain, the first thing we're meant to do is soothe them. It doesn't matter what they did, and it doesn't matter that you believe and you see the bigger picture, because we're older and we're Rosh and we saw what was going on. And we understand they brought all this mess on themselves. Hold all that for later. The first thing you do is, I have a child in tsar. Soothe your child. Sit with them. I'm with you. I feel for you. Why is all this important? When you do safe, secure, seen, and soothe, you do these 4 things I've described briefly here. You create extraordinary, healthy attachment with your children. And this is so crucial in life. It's crucial in their relationship with us as a parent, because we know that if we do this properly, ideally, then when they face their struggles and difficulties of life, they turn to us. They come to us. 99 times out of 100, if you have very secure attachments with your children, as you go through life, the neural pathways that were created in your neurological system, your DNA, your spiritual DNA, whichever way you want to look at it, tells you that despite how difficult life can be, I'm going to be fine. That's actually what happens. You go through very difficult troubles, challenges, problems, and issues, but internally, somehow you feel a person who was given the proper attachments, certainly someone who grew up with the mitzvah, their parents did the mitzvah, l'sheves yitzara, trying first to produce a healthy human being, and then will install gently mitzvahs into that person. But we never compromise, never. Like never get angry about a kid not doing negelwasser, a little kid. You know, it's so crazy to do such a thing. It's so completely aparta, they don't need to do it anyway. So how can we compromise what we're chayev in, which is to create a healthy person, for something they're not chayev in? Do you understand? It's just crazy. I'm not saying we shouldn't teach our kids negelwasser. Of course we should. What I'm saying is to compromise creating a healthy, attached, secure, safe person because of negelwasser, as if somehow that's more important, we're wrong. And we're actually destroying a child instead of building a child. This is the picture of what ideal chinuch, education, parental development should look like. And I can tell you that for people who get this, there are some people who actually got this. I can be witness to it because I have absolutely no sophic on earth. Reflectively, which is probably why I like this system so much, I got this from my mother. So despite the challenges and difficulties, my mother, Aleh Shalom, gave me the 4 S's, naturally. I didn't know they were. She probably never heard of them either. But she just did it. And I'm 100% confident that my success in life and things I do and my ability to go through incredibly difficult challenges and problems as I've been came from the safe, secure, seen and soothed of attachment that my mother gave me as a child that's lasted throughout my life. There's probably no greater gift we can give our kids ever than this gift of creating children who feel safe, secure, seen and soothed. They will turn to us when they have problems, and therefore, if they get challenged in life with difficulties, the greatest prevention we can ever do is creating that relationship where they feel safe and secure to come to us, where they turn to us for help and guidance. They don't harbor it inside, terrified, afraid, and ashamed to tell us, until it festers and festers and festers and bursts later on. Or worse still, where they tell us and all they get back from us is, "You did what? You crazy?" And say terrible things to them. Terrible things when they tell us, "Your Zayda, Alav Shalom, you know what he's feeling like that you did this?" It's just awful stuff. Doing this is the greatest prevention for the OTD sugya that could possibly exist. Because what happens is, by doing this, we create the vaccine, the spiritual vaccine that nourishes a person's life, so they turn to us, they believe in themselves, they believe in their own recovery, they get help quickly if they go through problems. This is the first step in prevention, is creating this picture. And one last point. In previous generations, I grew up in such a world, and I'm certain many people in this room grew up in such a world, where the external control over children, which we call limit setting today, but that control over children was achieved through withdrawing love and showing anger and frustration and disapproval. I grew up that way. Right? You did what? They gave you this angry look, a threat of a whack, right? Or we got more. We actually did get hit, and we got caned. And I grew up in England. We got caned. It was part of our, heritage. Certainly we got whacked. Svei in the old days, Svei solved everything. Didn't need parenting classes. Svei boom, boom, right? That's the way it was. The world gone by, parenting was delivered through withdrawing love and showing anger, frustration, disappointment. And more or less, sort of, it worked. Sort of. I don't know, because I didn't get that from my mother. I got it from my father, but I didn't get that from my mother. From my mother, I got the 4 S's. I think it worked better, frankly. But even then, I want to tell you, in the old days, it was not really done with anger. It wasn't an angry, reactive, out of control, furious matzav. It was just chinuch, chaysach shifta, seine benai. Right? It was like everyone did it. It was the way the world was, and everyone did it, and we sort of more or less got away with it. In this world, that's done. There is a very small miut of children in this world. Very, very small. People get upset with me when I say it. I wish I could do the research and prove it, but I'm convinced, I have no sophic on earth. It's a very, very, very small miut to whom the chaysach shifta soine b'noi mahalach still works. Svei petch and everything's fine. For everybody else, it doesn't work. And in fact, I'm going to talk about, so what are we meant to do? Got it. We're going to come there. Don't worry. I'm going to deal with it. But that was the old way, the way it was. And in the world we're living in today, this does not create the resilience children need. And this is the real issue here. What we're doing through the 4 S's and what we're doing through the 3 stages of parenting and through the Shevis Yitzhara is what we're doing is creating in our children resilience. Resilience. This word resilience does not mean that your children won't get hurt if something bad, difficult, hurtful happens to them. They will. That's the nature of a person. We're going to get hurt. The difference is this. When you're resilient, the drop, the descent, how far off you go is limited. And the amount of time it takes to recover is shortened. So a person who's resilient can overcome the challenges and difficulties and traumas of life easily and quickly. Whereas children who are not resilient, that means they've not been brought up this way. In today's day and age, what we're seeing more and more is how limited they are in resilience, and they fall apart. They fall apart really badly. So the first step of prevention for our children, we're going to see, is exactly the same as we're going to use and we're going to exploit some of these ideas in recovery to help our kids come back. It's the same thing. I just want you to understand conceptually, so you'll understand. If I would just say do this and that and the other, it wouldn't make sense. What we're going to be doing is reenacting the childhood experiences to reinstall resilience in our children, to put back the safe, secure, seen and soothed into their lives to help them recover. That's both the prevention and the recovery model. And during the day, in the next few hours, I'm going to show you exactly how that works. And it works amazing. Absolutely amazing. Just conceptually, if you hang on to this thought, I probably have a slide later on that says it, but just hang on to this thought. That in recovery, I gave you an example of how when the child throws the Cheerios over you, or the child draws on the wall, and your reaction is not to get angry. Your reaction is to take the pictures and laugh and pinch their cheeks, and you go get changed, and you deal with it later, whatever you have to deal with. But at the time, the child experiences your reaction of love. They know they've done something wrong. They know. They're aware that something got messed up here. But they see your reaction as one of love. So they learn to love themselves better when they do something wrong than when they do something right. Because when they do something right, they're not aware that you love them as much. But when they do something wrong, and you come back with smiles and love and a camera and pictures, you're installing love in them in a way you cannot do it when they do everything right. Listen to this idea. I know I have a slide on this later. This is the profundity of the whole approach. You heal a child better through their defiance than through their compliance. If you get this, it's kedai to be here today. Once you got this yesod, and it goes, you see how it goes back to everything I've been trying to talk about till now. This concept is a bombshell. You heal a child better through defiance than compliance. If your child is struggling, you got a Beis Yaakov girl, and she's 15 and she's struggling with sneers for whatever reasons. And you catch her dressing inappropriate, and you tell her, honey, you look so cute. First, before you go and have all the sneers conversations, but the first thing is, wow, you look beautiful. She feels loved as a person. So then you have a person you could talk to. But if your first reaction is anger, or if she's so intimidated and terrified that she'll dress this way privately in a changing room in a mall, or when she's out of the house and take pictures of herself, but she'll never show you, then she'll think you love me because of the way I dress, not because of who I am. And you can't heal her. You hear the difference? We reach the children through defiance better than through compliance is the underlying principle that is the profundity of this whole approach. And you see how it ties back into the 0 to 2 when they threw the Cheerios. If you think of your 15-year-old as throwing Cheerios all over you, and they're doing the same thing, and you reach through the havoc, rebellion, hurt, whatever they've done to you, you reach right through it and, so to speak, love them despite it. Then we can heal. Then we heal. This is the approach. And we're going to come to understand that, I hope, more deeply as we go through the day. So this is how we achieve discipline today. I'm teaching this to any schools that will listen to me. And it's working. And I trust me, I have schools all over the world are writing to me, asking, and I'm actually doing workshops and trainings in the schools to teach them. I was just doing this Shabbos, I was talking with a Manal about it at length, about how to do rules, structure, and discipline in the classroom, in the school, with absolute love, without getting angry, with an apology, how to give it a detention to a child, and apologize and say, Shefla, I'm so sorry you got a detention again. I really feel for you. Oh, but this is the rules. Look, so you got to, I feel terrible for you. Is there anything we could do to help you not get another detention? I'd love to help you. Instead of the old days, the svei petch, you're on probation. We're watching you. I'm not watching it, so the person. But the old days, that's what happened. And they didn't really shteltzu. What happened was, internally, they were so intimidated, but it was all a fantasy, and behind your back, they do whatever they want. We have to change it where, of course, we have to do rules, structure, and discipline. Without rules, structure, and discipline, we have anarchy. But when we do rules, structure, and discipline, the message they're picking up, because we did safe, secure, seen, and soothed with the children, is when we do rules, structure, and discipline on them, they experience it like the limit setting that this is in their best interest. We no longer say idiotic things like, not in my mosid. Not in my mosid you don't behave like that. We never say those things ever again. Not in my house. You want to stay in this house? The old days it was pack your bags. Today they say, sure, where's the bag? Which one? Can I take the whole set? Finally, you're letting me go. Thank you. Have a nice day. They go. In this day and age, we have to do it all with love. We have to do rules, structure, and discipline. It is anarchy without it. Anyone who says that we have a liberal approach completely misunderstands what we're trying to teach. We need a system with rules, structure, and discipline. The whole chap is that we do it in a way they're safe, secure, seen, and soothed, where they're loved, they're understood, and then they absorb it. And we need this desperately in this day and age. So all this is good, everything I said till now. This is the preventive, and it's also, I want you to keep in mind everything I've said so far, because all that works unless trauma strikes, some form of trauma. Because if some form of trauma strikes, see, people say, Russell says the whole OTD, they're all trauma victims, right? Okay. First of all, most people haven't got a clue what trauma is. So they're Stammnarishkeit. Interestingly enough, all the people who know about my shitas and disagree with me never called me. It's fascinating. They never came to this workshop. Anyone who comes to this workshop understands the sugya. The ones you will hear say, Russell, ask them, were you ever at a workshop? Did you ever sit to go through a 3-4 hour workshop? Did you? So how do you have shit? Did you call him, by the way? By the way, can you tell me what trauma means? Ask them. Do you know what? Could you define that word? What does it mean? You'll find out they haven't got a clue. Yeah, it's all Narishkeit, secular, goyish. Like an easy word, goyish. Rabbi say, we are all normal people. I'm willing to give a certificate for everyone who attends. You're all normal. You can show it on Shidduchim, you know. We are the normal people. You are, because you came here. That makes you normal. You came here to learn, makes you normal. Healthy, gesunde people. We're normal. Most of us, I can tell you, and I'm doing the work 33 years now, and I can tell you that almost everyone I meet are in a bell curve of normal people. There's normal people. Some are more this way, some are more that way, but as a community, in the bell curve of normal people, there's 10% of Sadiqim and Sidkanias, and 10% Taka suffer, unfortunately, with some sort of emotional or mental illness. And everyone else, 80%, that's us, in the middle. We're all normal. And we all do more or less reasonably, sort of ish, good parenting. That's us. None of us did all this perfectly. But we all did many of these components frequently. The problem is, what I'm going to be matarid, so we get it out of the way, is the question everyone has. There's a very shame-based question that everyone has in the back of their minds. And the question is this: I think I'm a pretty decent person, and here I got struggling kids, and I know I have sisters-in-law, and they scream and yell at their kids. And they're all like perfect. Each one's a valedictorian. Each one got the best shidduch there ever was. And they've all got like Derech Mevarachim and the whole business, Every Sheva Brachas is like more chashuv than the last. And I know they scream at their kids and they hit them, they schmeiß them, and my gosh, like, was is? We all have neighbors who we hear them through the walls screaming at their kids. They never hear me screaming at my kids, and they're all kids. They all like walk out, perfect little Beis Yaakov girls, and everything's fine. How do we mataritz that? So I thought about this for years and years and years, and I got the answers. Pasha to me. I see it now, and I've tested it so many times, it's always the same. More or less, good enough parenting isn't good enough anymore when trauma strikes. I just want you to understand this and accept this. That's what I'm saying. In other words, it's a combination. If we would all have known what to do, lechatchila, and had done this idealized parenting, then what happens is even when trauma strikes, the kids turn to us. They feel safe with us. They come to us and we help them. They get treatment and help quickly. They don't sit in the pain and misery of their sorrow. They don't feel ashamed about what happened to them. But when we do more or less good enough parenting, it isn't good enough. That's what I discovered when trauma strikes. So the real sugya, that's why I just want you to understand, the sugya of OTD, what I realized, and I've researched this, I've talked to kids, hundreds, thousands, obviously, by now, and it's always the same. It's always there. I met maybe one kid in my whole life who wasn't there. Just like went off. It didn't work for him. Okay, that's possible. Why not? The Eight Sahara, could be. But this notion that kids are going off to do with the Eight Sahara, please, every time I read one of these well-meaning, horrible articles in the contemporary magazines. I used to write back every time. I don't know if you ever saw my article. I used to fight back. They got fed up with me because it's like, it's like a ping pong match in Klal Yisrael. They want to sell newspapers, let's be honest. So they just they say these radical things. They always have an article from someone who, no, it's nothing to do with trauma. What happened to old-fashioned Yetzer Hara? It's just Yetzer Hara, and they bring you 15 chazals and zero experience. More or less good enough parenting, which is, I'm sure we all did, isn't good enough when trauma strikes. It doesn't sustain, it doesn't nourish. We didn't create enough resilience. We didn't know. So we didn't create enough resilience in our children so that when trauma struck, they couldn't deal with it. And I'm going to show you that and prove that to you so you'll see it. And the goal of this next section is to take you into that so you understand it so deeply that we walk out with nothing but compassion. Because if we're going to rebuild the safety with our children, they need to experience us as heartbroken. And I want to say this in an honest way. I've said it to my kids, that we take responsibility, not in a nebuchadnezzar, it's all my fault, crying and blaming ourselves. No, that's not helpful. That doesn't create security in our children. I mean responsibility where we can look our kids in the eye and say, the things I'm learning now I didn't know, and I do not hold you at fault. If anything, I wish I'd known what I'm now trying to know, and I would have been able to help you more. What our kids do not do well with is nebuchadnezzar, as if we're guilting them by us taking responsibility. It's all my fault, nebuch me, which just makes them feel guilty. That doesn't help anyone. What our kids need to hear is a mature response of, I am learning and I'm heartbroken as I begin to understand what actually happened to you due to no fault of your own. And I'm so embarrassed that I didn't know then, as you were growing up, what I'm learning now. I'm so embarrassed. In a mature way. Do you understand? Not in a nebuchadnezzar way, chas v'shalom, but in a mature way. Trauma, when it strikes, is too much for more or less good enough parenting. It's too much. And I'm going to explain why. So what is the trauma? I'm just going to give you a quick primer based on the fact of time. I'm going to move very quickly through some of this stuff. But it's there, and I suggest if it's not clear and you needed more information on this, just go and research it, find it, and examine this more. But trauma, you see, the problem with trauma is like this. In DSM, in the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, American Psychiatric Association, so there's a disorder called PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And the trauma that was always, until recently, understood to be the cause is what we really call a single event trauma, a horrific event, something that was life-threatening or in which someone near the person died, like in a car crash. Person's in a car crash. That is a traumatic experience, and someone nearly died or did die in that same car. The person is traumatized. Now, I want you to understand what the word means. If trauma was a word in Aramaic or in Yiddish or in Hebrew, I would translate it into English. So can you assume that's what it is? It's Aramaic, Yiddish, or Hebrew, and I'm going to translate the word. Remember this forever. The word trauma means disconnect. Disconnect. It means that a person experienced an event that was life-threatening, horrendous, horrific, so frightening that Kadosh Baruch Hu made us in a way where the nervous system retains the memory of that event to protect the person in the future. And whenever that possibility of something like that reoccurring happens, the nervous system makes you disconnect. You run away. So that's where fight, flight, freeze comes from, right? That's where it comes from. It's a nervous system, it's something ingrained in us, how we function, how the brain functions from early childhood. The word means to disconnect. This is a very important word because you will see what happens with our children, right? Is they disconnect from us and from our community and our values. When the location of the trauma is triggering in them feelings of horrendous fear and pain and shame, that's horrendous. So the nervous system makes them disconnect. That's what the word means. What is PTSD? Post-traumatic stress disorder. Remember this forever. Think of your child. If you have a child who is struggling like this, they will have a severe psychological reaction. In their language, they'll freak out. They'll freak, how do you say that in Yiddish? But they'll freak out, right? Freak out? I don't know. They'll have a severe psychological reaction at exposure to internal or external cues that symbolize or resemble an aspect of the original trauma. Kadosh Baruch Hu gave us this safety to keep us safe. So if you had a traumatic experience, as a child, I was 17, I was in a near fatal car crash. Driving on a motorway, 4 people in the car, the tire hit a chunk of metal going 70 miles an hour. It ripped the tire off. The car turned sideways and flipped 6 times through the air. The first time it hit the air, I thought I'd died. I actually said Shema. My mother, Leah Shalom, was 200 miles away, dropped a tray when that happened and said, Shimon's dead. 200 miles away. Exactly when it happened. I thought I was dead. We all survived. For 25 years after that, if ever I was in like a train or a car and there was this swaying, the weightless motion you can have in an airplane sometimes, I would go into a sweaty panic, not realizing what it was from, until I realized my nervous system that was convinced I was about to die, recorded the weightless feeling as it flew into the air when it flipped the first time, the car, retained that memory, and any time ever I was in a mess, till I understood what it was. Years later, I worked it out. But until I worked it out, every time I was in this weightless kind of feeling, I would have a panic attack. Panic attack. Immediately, I would start having a panic attack. I would start sweating until I understood, because the nervous system remembers those events to keep us safe, to keep you away from it. That's how trauma works. The idea is safety. The idea is survival. That's what trauma is about. Disconnect, to keep us safe. It's not nebuch. It's a very useful reaction in order we should always be safe. Now, there are 5 types of panic. I'm not going to go through them all. The normal stress reaction, acute stress disorder, uncomplicated PTSD refers to a single event, like lo aleinu, an abuse, a rape, a car crash, someone died. They're single event, relatively easy to treat. Comorbid is when it comes with a mental illness alongside it. But the one we're dealing with is complex PTSD. Complex PTSD is a new phenomena that's emerged in the mental health world. And I saw it very, very clearly in the last 20 years with our struggling children. Complex PTSD means simply that the child has experienced a myriad, perhaps millions, of micro traumas. Each one on its own, geht mir nicht an. You go on with life. It's fine. It doesn't bother you. If it was just one, no. Who hasn't experienced some bad event? But when you experience hundreds and thousands of those experiences, the research has now shown that the brain and the nervous system react identically with a myriad of micro-traumas as it would with a single event, near-death, horrendous experience. It is identical. And this is profoundly important to us because 99.9% of all the children that I work with who are struggling in this sugya have complex trauma. Complex doesn't mean it's complicated. Complex trauma simply means it's a combination of a myriad of micro-traumas, almost all of which, none of them have the hallmark of a single event trauma, and therefore it's so much harder to treat. All the conventional modalities for treating it are much more complicated because when it's a single event, you have what to focus on. When it's a myriad of micro events that could have spanned years in the child's life, there's no, you understand, you don't have an event to grab onto, to talk about. There's just too many of them. But what we've begun to understand is all these kids, all of them, are trauma victims. They're all suffering with complex trauma. Bli shum yotzim min haklal. And this is crucial. And it's good news. Because if we understand what it is, then we have a good chance to treat it. We have a very, very good chance to heal it. If we know what it is. And if we don't know what it is, how are we going to get to it? So what is complex PTSD? Like I said, well, let me run through this. I've done it already. Where is complex trauma? I'm just rushing ahead because of time to make sure we get the ICA slides in here. So, listen, forgive me. I'm going to talk about some very sensitive material. There's a Bala Ma'or I just want to mention. The Bala Ma'or is a Rishon. The Bala Ma'or asks in Psachim, Daf Gimel, he asks a very important question. We all know in Pashas Noach, when Noach takes the animals into the Teva, it says the animals, the Tahiris and the She'enim Tahiris. He uses an extra word. The Torah, so to speak, wastes, he could have said Tameas, but it says She'enim Tahiris, use an extra word. And the Meforshim will tell us that when possible, we use Lashon Naki. We don't say words that we don't have to say, like Tame. We don't say it if it's unnecessary. Frek the Bala Ma'or, he says, but take a look at the rest of the Torah. You find throughout the Torah, parshas and parshas, Tamehu, by behemoths and animals, all sorts of things. Tame. It's always saying Tame. So what's that over there? It says, behemoths, Tahiris, of She'enim Tahiris. We say Lashon Naki. What's with the rest of the Torah? It's the Bala Ma'or. And the answer is really, essentially, that when it's halacha l'maisa, there's Sipuri Maisim by Noach. I think it's a story. But when it's halacha l'maisa, we have to say it the way it is. And therefore I'm going to ask your forbearance with me. I'm going to talk about material that we don't normally talk about. I've discussed this with Gedolei Yisrael, and I'm absolutely clear for myself that what I'm going to talk about is necessary, crucial, and has to be said, and it has to be said the way I'm saying it. This much I'll say, is that when I'm finished, if anyone feels I could have said this differently, perhaps with a Lashon Naki, or in a different way, please, rather than walk out and say Lashon Hara about me, send me an email. Just send me an email. Just tell me how I could have said it better. I'm makabel criticism when it's constructive. I appreciate it. So please just let me know. But I'm just giving you an advance warning that I need to describe stuff so that we can understand our children. Otherwise, we're letting them down. We're letting them down. We have to be real. So what are the traumas? This is the question everyone asks me. Fine, so it's trauma. What is it? What's the trauma? What's so traumatic? So let me make a shtickle hakdama. In our world, in our heilige Torah world, there are two pillars on which we exist. One day I'm quoted, Omer Rabbi Shimon, Al Shtei Amudim, the Olam HaTorah Omed, they would be Hatznei Leches v'Limud HaTorah. These two pillars. The nafka mina in these two pillars is they're not what we do, they're who we are. I want you to absorb that. It's not what we do. We do mitzvahs, but it's who we are as people are built on the two pillars for children of Hatznei Leches and Limud HaTorah. Let's take Hatznei Leches, because the first group of relational developmental traumas that happen to these children that throw them off are sexual and relate to the destruction of their lives through sexuality that completely destroys them. Because Hatznei Leches, you see, I want to tell you the ideal in our world, I believe. And I once met a couple for whom it's true. The ideal in our world is that we live within a bubble. We live our lives. We teach our children to live in both boys and girls, to live in a bubble of Hatznei Leches. Hatznei Leches isn't only about sexuality, it's about Hanhagas Chaim. It's about being humble. It's about, even if you're Zeicha, you have a lot of money and you buy a building and you donate it, you don't put 20-foot high neon lights flashing in red with your name and arrows, I bought this building. That's not in Hatznei Leches. It's not appropriate. Hatznei Leches governs how we live our lives in a humble and modest way. And it includes the covering of the body, the protection and the sanctity and sacredness of the body, keeping it covered with the halachas as appropriate to men and as appropriate to women. It's all in this beautiful bubble, and ideally, the way we've set up our world through the eyes of Chazal, Torah, and the Rabbanim that are madrichas, that we live in this beautiful bubble of Hatznei Leches, and eventually our children grow up and they become a chosin and kala, and at that point, prior to the chasna, we expand, this is very, very important to understand, we expand the bubble of Hatznei Leches to incorporate the behavior, sexual behavior that will be appropriate when they get married so they can produce children. It's incorporated. It's beautifully, appropriately put in there as an extension, an expansion of Hatznei Leches. It's not another bubble. It's part of the way we are. It's who we are, and it's how, ideally, this is what we would want and wish for our children. I once met a young couple like that, who I had given the young man his chosin shmuz, and told him, you could call me afterwards, their problems. And they had some difficulties and called me. And both his and his fresh kala were totally comfortable talking to me about being intimate. And I was so misragish from them. There was no guilt or shame or embarrassment. There was, clearly they'd incorporated this as just an extension of Hatznei Leches. It was so beautiful. It was so, I gave him a bracha, I remember. I gave him a gift and I gave him a bracha that Halavai should bring up children like this. This is what we want. You're it. You did it. It was so touching. What happens when a child is sexually abused, exposed to sexuality early in life, especially against their will? So what happens in sexual abuse, the trauma of it is that it creates a whole different bubble called sexuality. And in that bubble, there's no way ever that can be supported, appreciated, or valued. All it is something to be deeply ashamed of, profoundly ashamed of. Worse still, the children who, And it's about 1 in 5 in our community. About 20% of all children will have a childhood sexual abuse experience. Those poor children now have another bubble. It's not in the Hatznei Aleches bubble. In fact, what they're now going to be zeicha to is well-meaning, and I mean this without any cynicism, well-meaning parents and schools who are constantly making statements of a very passionate, strong encouragement to their children, instruction, not just encouragement, instruction to their children about how to live their lives and keep their bodies covered properly and how to conduct themselves. Everything from hairstyle to the type of shoes you wear. Everything. Unaware, almost in all cases, that this poor child has been sexually abused. That means they are now in the world of sexuality. They're aware of themselves as a sexual being. They may be engaged with themselves sexually and or others sexually. And what they hear the whole time is, you are a goy gomer. You are shagets. You are disgusting. When frequently, especially in the schools, when the well-meaning, and again, please do not detect cynicism, there isn't any, when the well-meaning teachers and rebbeim try to encourage and inspire the children in appropriate covering of their body and conduct in the world of tznius, they contrast it with them, the goyim. That's for the goyim. Das ist nicht für uns. Das ist nicht Kedushas Yisrael. Das ist goy. Das ist shegets. Das ist nicht uns. And they get very passionate about it. And again, I repeat, this is not to be interpreted or heard in any way that's cynical. And they're unaware that in their class of 30, roughly 5 kids have been sexually abused. And those 5 kids, day after day, will hear drashas, speeches, confirming to them, you are a goy gomer. That if we were feeling, that if, this is what they feel, that if you, my parents, teachers, rebbeim, knew who I am and how I feel about myself and how I touch myself, if you would know, you would reject me. You would throw me out. You would consider me a piece of garbage. You would wish I was never born. Imagine the following. I'm going to say something painful, but I just want to bring it home. Imagine someone has a child, and your child does the system well, perfectly. Everything works out just fine, beautifully. And your daughter becomes a kala, and it's 5 months to the chasna, and everything's good, Baruch Hashem. She gets married, and 3 months after the chasna, this shy, cute little girl, oh, thank you, Shkaya, thank you very much. Thank you. And 3 months after the chasna, as happens in many homes, my wife and I experienced this with a number of our children. Your daughter comes to you one day, she's all shy, a little awkward, a little embarrassed, and she says, Mommy, I got good news. I'm expecting. And in most homes, everyone starts crying. It's just a beautiful, touching moment. She cries, her mother cries, gives her a hug. It's just a beautiful, special, wonderful moment. Even the father cries when he hears about it, which is like a chiddush, but he does. You know, it's just, this is what we wanted. You know, they're married and we're going to, it just is a special, touching moment. Anyone who's experienced it knows it. What we don't say is, you don't look at her and say, you're what? You did what? You don't ask. It doesn't fit in Hatznei Aleches. It's none of your business what she did. We all know what she did, but we don't talk about it. It's not appropriate. We just are happy and we move on. And you're just happy for her. And it's something we support and we're proud of. And when she starts showing and the extended family know, it's just a joy. It's just a joy. It's just like, wow. It just is, Baruch Hashem. It's just a very incredibly special thing that we all support. She eventually has a baby. We support. We're excited. The family makes simchas upon simchas. And there's more simchas. There's kiddushim and vachnach and a bris and a shom zocher. I mean, we go crazy with simchas. We love simchas. And we celebrate the fact that she was sexually active. That's a joy, but we don't talk about it. We're just thrilled. Now take the same girl. She becomes a Kala. No difference. Same person, same story, same parents, same family, same everything. She gets engaged. 5 months later is the Chasna. And 3 months later, 2 months before the Chasna, she comes and tells her mother, Mummy, I think I'm expecting. Basically, there is almost no Gehinnom that can be described like that moment. It's an utter disaster. You want to fall through the ground and disappear. You feel like dying. You're in so much shock you can't even cry. You're so bewildered how that possibly could have happened. You're such a loss. It's the exact same situation. There's no difference except chronology, time. One is the highest pinnacle of joy in our families, and one is the nightmare of Gehinnom. You want to open the trapdoor and disappear. It's so unbearable. Because that one has no support in our world. We cannot support that behavior. There is no option. Even in treatment, the traditional treatments of Goyim, the secular world, for sexual abuse, mostly doesn't work for us. Because in their world, they can experiment. We can't. There's no option for a kid. A kid that's been sexually abused has no out. There's no way it can be supported. There's no way they can be felt and understood and accepted. And in our world, where we appropriately, again, I want to say it appropriately, are mechazik our children in the strongest way about this world of hatznei aleches, of keeping ourselves covered and private, and keeping private parts private. And we make such a dogish on that. It's so important to us. And we do frequently contrast the people who behave that way. Why should I worry?
No, I'm saying,
you're the best.
no.
He's the best. When I have him here, I feel safe. I can tell you right now. I mean it. You know that. Yeah, don't worry. These poor kids, and there's kemat no treatment, there's no way out. I have to Rebbeim. I tell Rebbeim when I give workshops, they say to me, so what am I meant to do? I shouldn't talk about it? I said, no, you should. But what you should know is that if you have a class of 30, above in teenage years for sure, chances are you've got 5 abuse victims in your class. Same for the girls. I taught in seminary. I gave a class by accident, mamish by accident. The girls asked me about the off the Derech because they all had relatives, sisters, and they asked me and I spoke about it. And totally by accident, it was a frum, yeshivische, chasidische girls, and by accident, and I promise you, I mentioned sexual abuse, which was a big no-no. I ran to the head of the place afterwards before he heard about it, and I said these words in front of the girls. He asked me what happened. I said nothing. They were more interested. They were asking questions. I said, before you kill me, I'm just telling you, it wasn't an agenda. It just happened. And he told me it's okay. Thank you. He told me it's okay. 3 in that class came to me during recess. 2 were actively still being abused in a seminary class. And no one ever talked to them about it. They were dead inside, completely dead. 1 went off completely later on, and 1 survived. She got treatment. Yeah, I'm about there. Yeah, good, perfect. No, mamish perfect. Thank you. There's no support for them. As I say to the Rebbeim and teachers, what you're meant to say to your class is, Rabbosai, listen carefully. We're about to talk about a very sensitive subject. You're mature enough that we need to talk about it. But I want to say, before I speak, that in this class in front of us, and those of you know who you are, by the way, everyone else, of all the children, all know about this. So the idea that we shouldn't say this because they will put ideas into their heads is absurd. They all know. It's just absurd. But what they're meant to say is, there are some children in this class who've been touched inappropriately, and you know who you are. And I want you to know that everything I'm about to say does not apply to you. In fact, it's also for you to listen. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu has a different path for you. A different path for reaching Him and getting close to Him. And there are different ways to get there. And what I'm about to say doesn't apply to you. Come to me and I'll talk to you how to get there. But please ignore every single word I'm about to say, because it doesn't belong to you. I spoke in London, and there was some Rebbeim, it was 2 Rebbeim about how to do this. And one of them sent me a voice note afterwards that 6 boys in his class afterwards came and spoke to him. 6. He probably just saved 6 lives. They were bar mitzvah age boys. 6. The problem is that these kids hear messages constantly that you're a goy, you're a shagitz, you're disgusting. Worse still, to understand the trauma. By the way, I'm not going to give a whole drosha just on this. I just want to take you into their world to understand it. Worse still, it's nishno that I'm a guy and I'm this and I'm that person you're saying I am. But most kids who experience sexual abuse have one of 2 options to deal with it. They either act out or they act in. The ones who act in cut, burn, do drugs. They want to shut down the feelings. Many of them will shut down anything to do with sexuality. They become super frum sometimes, only to discover when they get married how their marriages are wrecked because they shut it down, because sooner or later they have to face it, and they face it with such deep shame and grief, or don't want to face it at all and get destroyed when they get married. You can't escape. There's no escape, that's my point. Then you have the ones who act out. This is the ones I get frequently asked about. I don't understand it. She got abused or he got abused. Why are they acting out and dressing like that? And they do it to survive. Because if I'm acting out and enjoying myself, then it's as if I'm denying anything bad happened to me. I'm not ashamed. I'm enjoying this. It's a coping mechanism. It's a nebuch. Not only are they hurt the way they are, but then the very act of trying to survive, they're condemned for that too, instead of understood. I see kids acting out sexually. I'm 100% aware I'm looking at a sexual abuse victim. Tragically, many of these, if there's mental health professionals here, you should know that tragically, they go to therapy, many of these kids, with inexperienced therapists who will ask them, were you ever sexually abused? And they say no. The reason they say no is because they have no notion of what the words mean. They think of it as like rape. They think of it as some old man in the park who forces them into a bad situation. They don't think of what happened to them as sexual abuse. So they say no, and the therapist checks it off and goes weiter. For me, I always say to the kids, when they say no, they all say no. They all say no. And I say to them, would you mind if I explain to you for a few minutes what sexual abuse is? And then you'll let me know if you were or not. And I explain to them what sexual abuse is. And they all say, wow, I mean, that's how you're going to describe it. That's how you define it, of course. All of them. Every one of them. They live in a world of pain, miaskeit, and hurt and rejection. Like I said, trauma is about disconnect. And they have to get away from the things that trigger the feeling of shame inside them. So when you see a kid, you imagine I'm saying all this so we understand that when you see her dressing and she's not buttoning up, or she's not, her hairstyle or her shoes or whatever, she's young and she's expressing herself in an inappropriate fashion, and what we do is come down hard on her instead of understanding why she's doing it. We condemn her to the OTD world. We push her off. We tell her the only option she has is to go off. She'll never be accepted in our world. See, like I said, one of the two pillars of who we are, not how we live, of who we are as people is Hatznei Alechas. It's who we are. It's our essence. When that's taken from a person, then who you are as a person crumbles. You disappear for who you are inside. And that's devastating. Utterly devastating. The second one is the learning traumas. And I have two types I always define. There's the ones who actually have learning disabilities that are real and genuine. My family suffered with a whole bunch of children who had genuine learning disabilities, and we didn't know what they were. We're going back 25 years ago. We had no clue what processing problems really meant, but they couldn't learn. And when you're in the yeshivish system and you can't learn, so you've taken it from them. See, going to learn, imagine a child goes to learn and they're a Gutzkeit. They're a sweet kid, you brought them up well. And they go to school and you condemn them to go back into that school day after day, and they can't learn. So then we hire tutors. And then we send them to special ed classes and resource rooms. And we don't realize, because I talk to these kids, I know what happens. What happens to them is they're confirmed forever that I am such a b'diavad Jew. Because learning is one of the axioms of who we are. It's not something we do, it's who we are. And we destroy them completely. They carry a pain and burden for the rest of their lives. It's no surprise at all. I've heard this from so many of the kids, especially the boys, who've said to me, I will not have children and put them through that. I will not do that. The agony, it's like, imagine the bar mitzvah of that. And it's, again, if you detect cynicism, it's not there. It's not there. It's descriptive. But imagine that bar mitzvah where that kid finishes Shisha Sidrei Mishnah for his bar mitzvah. And the whole world goes crazy over it. Or the 18-year-old who finishes high school and he's finished Shas already. These kids we put on a pedestal, perhaps correctly, because they've done amazing accomplishment. Amazing. Something we hope to inspire all the children to do, and to do these great things. But how do all the rest of the kids who have learning disabilities, due to no fault of their own, and will never in their lives ever have that schus and that encouragement, appreciation, love, and respect ever, despite how hard they try. They will never have it. On the contrary, they will observe in their parents' faces, until you've come to this workshop, disappointment, frustration. They do homework and it turns into a nightmare of affirmation that you're a loser. Where parents sit frustrated, disappointed, it takes so long, you're taking so much of my time. As if somehow they're doing it deliberately. There are genuine learning disabilities, and then there are the de facto learning disabilities. That means where a child is disabled to learn because of tsaras, because of problems, because of trouble in the home and trouble in the family and trouble in life, because of maybe just their unique sensitive personality they were born with, they never asked for. Take ADD, a kid who has a genuine impulse disorder. Did he ask for that? If she has an attentional disorder, did she ask for it? Well, then how dare we condemn these children in our system and make them feel like they're losers? What does it feel like when we, caring, loving parents, every day send our children who cannot learn back into a Moised HaTorah whose primary goal is to get Yediyah in their brains and they can't do it? How do you think they look at us? Is it any surprise that kids like that want to disconnect from us and from our system? Kids who can't read properly and their father drags them to shul with them Shabbos because kid has to daven, right? You got to daven. And nudges his kid all the way through davening, whose the words are swimming, he has no clue. And there's always, by the way, most men know this, one row ahead, a kid who's 6 years old and davens like the Baal Shem Tov himself. This angelic kid, he's always in front. Every father sees one of those kids. It's just like there's always a neighbor who has a daughter who is the most perfect sneer sticker angel that ever walked the face of this earth. And she's just so polite. She's so nice. The kids who can't learn, until we work out what to do about this in our system, these kids are in profound trouble. They are traumatized. That means complex trauma. Micro traumas of every single time they go to school and feel like a loser. Add all that up cumulatively to what they feel like as they get older, and you discover that their brains are traumatized. And trauma means disconnect. Get me out of here. And if we didn't do the parenting I described at the beginning, the idealized parenting, they don't come and tell us. They don't actually tell you how they feel because they're too ashamed. They disconnect. You see a look in their eyes of disconnect, disinterested in us, Torah, the system. They drift away from the table very quick. The moment you start a Dvar Torah, they're out of there. They shut down. They're much more interested in storybooks and comics than they're ever interested in learning Torah because they don't feel traumatized by that stuff. Why would they open? You know how many adults, men, I know who are actively still trauma victims from learning, whose shalom bayis got completely wrecked because the wife was so terribly disappointed he's not doing homework and learning with the boys. But it turns out he can't. Because every time he sits down to learn with them, he realizes, I can't do it. I don't really understand it. And all his childhood is driven up inside himself to make him feel like such a loser, such a bad person. And then he has to deal with his wife's shame, looking at him that he doesn't learn and doesn't learn with the kids. we're looking at a disaster that we at least have to understand what our children feel. I have mahalchim for all of this. That's not the job today. There are ways to remediate and change all of this if we would actually wake up and want to. And stop fooling ourselves that everyone's doing fine, aren't they? We're doing great. Look at us. Aren't we amazing? So that's the trauma. There are, be'etzem, in relational and developmental traumas, 5. Physical, emotional, psychological, sexual, and spiritual. All the ones hitting kids today and this day. We got caned, we got whacked. I mean, my gosh. I got caned till I was 14. My father went to hit me the last time when I was 14. I blocked him. And he looked at me totally, I was as big as him by then, and I blocked him. And he looked at me totally calm. And he said to me, Shimon, he said, do you think you can grow up healthy if I don't hit you anymore? I was blocking his hand. I looked him in the eye. I said, I think so. Think so. And he said, okay. And he never hit me again. None of that, hitting with achzarius and anger, the abuse it does to today's children, hitting them, how it deprives them of the safety and security. And the worst part you have to understand of all this is when kids hit a traumatic experience, we as parents do not know. We rarely know when they're sexually abused till years later, if ever. Often we don't even find out till after they're married, even though it's right in front of our face, but we don't know what we're seeing. Learning traumas we rarely understand because most people, certainly the men, are too ashamed to admit it. It's embarrassing to admit that you can't learn properly. It's just a shame. It's just shameful. So we miss this stuff. If we didn't do the anchor of the proper parenting I talked about, well, then our kids don't feel safe to come and talk to us. So we can't help them repair it. That's why it's so crucial to create the healthy attachments when they're little, so that if things happen to them outside the home, things we have no control over, they can turn to us. But if we don't, they all end up with the last one, E, spiritual abuse. Because what they look at, you have to understand, take the 2 amudim I said, Hatznei Leches and Limud HaTorah, is all to do with Yadus, with Torah, with being a Yid. It's all about being Yifrum. The 2 pillars that we bring up our children's lives dedicated to these 2 pillars of Hatznei Leches and to Limud HaTorah is because we're from Yidden. Therefore, kids who lose these 2 pillars all suffer spiritual abuse. Do you see that? Because the cause of their hurt is because we're from. So if the thing that's causing it, the trauma, is related to frumkeit, then if trauma means disconnect, they have to disconnect from being from. It's a survival. It's not something they want. It's just how they're surviving. I'm going to move through this because it's... I want to add just quickly to this what I spoke about. That sexual abuse can happen even without a person, without an abuser. A person can be abused by exposure alone. I've known so many young kids who unfortunately had access to sexual material, whether it was a magazine or a film or a book, a DVD, the internet. There was never an abuser, but if you now understand that exposure to and becoming a sexual being takes you out of the world of being a frum yid, because now you're a sexual being, so you can be abused without an abuser, and it happens all the time. Full range of sexual abuse symptoms and the consequent behavior because of it. The second thing is, by the way, with sexual abuse, is it destroys normative sexual development. This is the most destructive part of all. So, for example, boys who are molested pre-puberty by an older male, when they hit puberty, typically will no longer develop the natural, normal, negative reaction to male sexuality that regular males develop at puberty. That means essentially that boy will also have same-sex attraction. It's a disaster. Do you understand the disaster of life? A kid gets molested when he's 5. That stays latent inside. In 5, 6, 7, they were playing around with him, older boys. When he hits puberty, he is not gifted like the rest of us with a nauseous disgust to male sexuality, which a normal boy gets at puberty. He discovers he has tivus noshim and a disgust for tivus anoshim. A boy who's molested pre-puberty doesn't develop that strong disgust to male sexuality. And he's still in school. He's still involved with boys, perhaps in a dorm, in school, going to the mikveh, and discovering that he has desire or lust for certain males. His life is wrecked. His life is wrecked. Utterly wrecked. And as I tell the boys when they sit and cry with me, and I cry with them when we go through this, and they ask me, can I get it back? And the answer is no, you cannot. And that's going to be your journey now, through your life. You cannot turn it off. A boy that was molested pre-puberty cannot throw a switch and regain a normative disgust for male sexuality that the rest of us have. And it will be his burden through the rest of his life. Is there any miracle these kids, how do they live with themselves? For the girls, if their molestation happened at the hands of an older woman, which actually happens frequently, then their reenactment is with women, and they discover that they have same-sex attraction to women. And that's part of their burden and their journey. It's really profoundly impossible for these kids to live. And they have no one to talk to because no one understands them. No one understands the simple, shameful burden they carry inside, which they're just afraid to even talk about because of the humiliation and shame. It destroys normative sexual development. For us in our world, that's really where the doggish is. And we have no way to normalize that in our world. It takes very, very delicate, ongoing treatment to help these kids through this. The damage is profound. But I've never really got there unless the parents have the most deep, heartbroken compassion where they can look at their child and understand their reaction and stop trying to fix them, but to be with them instead, to understand them first and just be with them on their journey and stop trying to fix them. Stop saying things like, look, I understand, Shefla, it happened, but don't you see you're bringing this on yourself more by doing this, that, or the other? You understand, that's poison to say to such a child. They're reacting in a way that they're surviving, trying to survive, feeling they want to commit suicide. And here I am taking that away from them. Their life is a disaster. And I want to mention one last thing about sexual abuse. That the trauma of secondary abuse, of not believing them, is worse. Everything I described so far, which is just the top tip of the iceberg of the pain and struggle of sexual abuse, everything I described, it is worse, the damage, when children are not believed. When they tell us what's happened, and we macher avek, I'll tell them to just get over it. So it happened, but Don't lose your life over it. As if they somehow have a way to turn it off inside. And worse still, when it happens at the hands of a relative or a chosh of a neighbor, and we don't stand up for our child, and we don't protect them and stand up for them and stop that other person, and they carry their shame, we're looking at profound suicidal ideation. Profound. In fact, most suicide notes that are left, which have been shown to me, always include that the perpetrator got away with it. Was still a finer yid in the community, somehow wasn't taken to task. Those suicide notes almost always include it. The damage is beyond. Spiritual abuse. So, just understand that spiritual abuse is because of any other form of I want. If a child knows that the cause of why I'm suffering so badly is related to our religious life and our determination to keep a life of Hatznei Aleches and learning Torah, when a kid knows that, then they are also ipso facto spiritually abused. And they want to disconnect from our world, which is why they drift away from Torah mitzvahs, because it embodies the very grief and hurt that happened that destroyed them. This is crucial in our understanding, because if we don't understand this, it's very difficult to get them back. And if we do understand this, and we come to understand it, embrace it, and relate to it, and be nosa ba'ol with it, it frees a child to learn how to find a pathway back. I'm just going to mention quickly impulse disorder, very quickly, because so many of the kids are considered impulsive and have impulse disorders. So I'd like just to explain to you very quickly what an impulse disorder is. What does it mean? So that we can relate to them, because they all get traumatized. All impulse disordered kids in our community end up traumatized because our expectations of them and the way we deal with them doesn't help them overcome. On the contrary, it condemns them to a destroyed sense of self, and they relate that to religion. So just understand and follow this. It'll take 1 minute. A child, everyone in the brain, we have part of the brain where we're aware that a threat is coming my way. Like if you walk out of this building to your car and you see a massive dog come running at you, then you have cognition. That means awareness that there is a threat. There's awareness in the brain, there's a threat. We then have reaction, cognition, then reaction to work out how to deal with the threat. Between cognition and reaction, the brain has what's called a synapse, a space. And in that space, we develop a hierarchy in a millisecond of potential ways to deal with the threat. The one we choose is always the one that is most effective to deal with the problem, the best preserves personal dignity. So we go down the list looking for a dignified way for dealing with the threat. For example, if we walk out this building and a big dog came running at you, so you have options. Run back in the building, run into your car, climb on a car, climb up a stop sign to get away from it. So a man, if given the option, and the quickest one is climbing up the stop sign, is more likely to climb up the stop sign than a woman will. I think I'm correct about that. She'll go for the back in the car or back in the building. It's dignity. We go for the one that best effectively deals with the situation, the best preserves personal dignity. Does that make sense? So watch carefully. I'll show you an impulse disorder. I'm just doing this fast because of lack of time. Ready for an impulse disorder? This is an impulse disorder. There is no space between cognition and reaction. That's what ADD, attention deficit, the impulse part of it looks like. They don't have a space between the awareness of the threat and the reaction to the threat. So they take the first thing that comes to mind, which is always effective for dealing with the problem, and almost always, thank you, I've got sugar. I see I need to drink. They keep bringing me. It must mean something. Thank you. So the one an impulse disordered child chooses is almost always very effective, highly effective for dealing with the threat, and terrible for personal dignity. Terrible, because they don't have a space. So they're always getting in trouble. I had a kid I was working with. He was always getting into fights because the other kid started out with me. I'm going to give him back. As many times as his parents talked to him in the school, walk away, count to 10, you're going to start a boom. He just hit them back. One day, a kid, he had a fight in the playground, and he won the fight, and he walked into class all victorious, and the other kid jabbed him in the ribs and ran to the other side of the class, so to speak, victorious. He won the fight now. The kid with the impulse disorder felt the humiliation, picked up a book and threw it across the class at him, broke his glasses, nearly took his eye out, cut his head. And the principal was mad and said, I'm going to expel him, I've had it, I'm done, I can't keep him in the school. I said, why? He won't admit it. He won't admit what he did. How can we work with him if he don't admit it? I said to him, will you let me come down? I'll talk to him in front of you, and we'll see if he doesn't admit it. He said, sure. I said, but don't say anything. Just watch me, and don't get upset with anything I say. So he said, fine. I come down there, and I sit with him. This kid's angry. Whoa, is he angry? I sit in the principal's office, really mad. And I said, I hear what happened, and I described what I'd heard. He threw he punched you in the ribs, threw the book, he broke his glasses, blood, Hatzalah came. Do I have the facts right? Nods. I said, well, it looks like he's not going to do that again. So and he looks up at me right away. The principal, I think, is going to strangle me. I said, I don't think he's going to do that again. If I was him, threw the book, nearly took his eye out. Whoa. No one's going to start up with you. This is for sure. You're in good place now. You dealt with it. No threats going on here. Am I right? Yeah, well, he shouldn't have done it, he said. I said, I understand, but you had no choice. You had to throw that book, and you had to I just validated what he did. 3 or 4 times I validated it. I'm sure the principal was having conniptions, nearly a heart attack watching this. And then the kid looks up to me, and I knew this would happen because I knew the kid. And he says to me, is he okay? I said, I don't know. They took him to hospital. He said, did he lose his eye? And I asked the principal. And he said, we don't know. And the kid burst out crying. Burst out crying. By validating what he didn't have a choice. You understand? There wasn't a space. He took the first thing off the list. That doesn't make him evil. And tuning into his choice brought the compassion out of him. It was his friend. It was his friend. And then I said to him, tell me something. If I had been there at that moment, when he jabbed you in the ribs, and I'd shown you another way to deal with it that wouldn't have risked taking his eye out, would you have done it? And he's crying and said, of course, crying. Impulse disorder, you understand, is they don't have a space. So their entire lives, they're being told off every day as if you're a bad person. All he's doing is what God made him do, protect himself. Take care of himself. The job with impulse is to open the space. But instead we contend, why are you doing that? Again, didn't I tell you? How many times did I tell you? Are you crazy? We've spoken about this so many times. Blah, blah, blah. So they end up traumatized too. So all these ADD kids, Nebuch, they're all trauma victims too, because they're always doing something wrong and getting blamed for it, but they have no power or control not to. Until we learn how to treat it, which is as simple as opening a space. Validate whatever he did. You always have to validate it or you have no access. You have to say, it worked. However crazy it was, it worked. But I'm not sure it was the right choice. Maybe there's a better choice. Open the space. But they don't get that. And they get criticism and criticism until they become fully fledged trauma victims. So it's a surprise they become traumatized. So let's do it. Is it okay if we don't take any break? I just keep going. People, you need the bathroom, just go and come back. Oh, we do need a break? 1 second. Apparently the boss says we need a break. Do we need a break? 10 minutes? 10 minutes. I'm going to start in 10 minutes. Exactly 10 minutes. Okay.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.